I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am trying to get this off my chest. My name's Dave, and I've been married to Lisa for about 5 years now. We seemed pretty solid at first, you know. Good job, decent life, and we had our moments. But after I lost my leg in that accident last year, yeah, I was in a freak car crash, things started to feel different. Not just for me, obviously, but for her too. She was the one who insisted on staying with me through the whole thing, even when I was in the hospital for weeks and then months of rehab. I really thought she was the one, devoted, caring. But I guess I was blind. That whole period was rough, obviously. I had to learn to live all over again, adapt to new limitations, and figure out how to get through each day. At first, Lisa was supportive, or so I thought. She'd come to the hospital, bring me my favorite snacks, and we'd watch TV together. But once I got home, things shifted. She'd be glued to her phone more often, texting late into the night. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just catching up with friends or work stuff. I mean, I was still trying to get used to my prosthetic, still adjusting to the fact that part of my body was missing. I thought maybe she was just tired, or maybe she was feeling overwhelmed herself. But then I noticed her phone started disappearing more. She'd take it to the bathroom or hide it when I was around. Little things. And I thought maybe I was just paranoid. I didn't want to believe she could cheat on me, especially not now, when I was most vulnerable. Still, I kept my eyes open just in case. I'd catch her in little lies, saying she was working late when I knew she was home, or claiming she was out with friends when the house was dead silent. I didn't want to accuse her without proof, but I felt this gnawing suspicion growing inside me. One day, I was borrowing her phone because mine was dead after a long appointment with my doctor. I was just trying to check my messages, nothing big. That's when I saw it. There were these messages, flirty, intimate, between her and this guy Mark. I didn't recognize the name at first, but I knew the tone immediately. It was fucking obvious. They were talking about sex, about meetings, about how much they wanted to see each other. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my partner, was cheating on me with some prosthetic specialist she met, someone she was supposed to trust, someone who was supposed to help me get better. Instead, she was screwing around with him. I felt this cold wave of shock and rage hit me all at once. I had to sit down, my heart pounding like crazy. How long had this been going on? Was I so blind I didn't see the signs? Or was she just lying her ass off? I felt betrayed, humiliated, and sick. It was like the floor had fallen out from under me. I didn't even know what to think anymore. All I could do was stare at those messages, trying to process the fact that my wife, the woman I trusted, was out there having sex with some guy behind my back, while I was just trying to recover from losing my leg. Everything suddenly felt so much more real, and so much more fucked up. I sat there for a long moment, just staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The words, they weren't just casual banter. They were filled with desire, with a kind of raw craving that made my stomach turn. I felt like my insides had been ripped out. The worst part was knowing she had lied to me, played the part of the devoted wife while secretly sneaking around with Mark. I kept asking myself, how long has this been going on? Did I miss the signs? Was I so caught up in my recovery that I failed to see what was really happening right under my nose? I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't want to do it immediately. I needed to gather myself first. I needed to think this through. The betrayal was so raw, so deep, I wasn't sure I could face her right away. Instead, I spent the next few hours trying to piece everything together. I looked at her recent texts, her social media conversations, anything that might give me more clues. I noticed she'd been unusually dismissive lately, snapping at me over small things like I was an inconvenience. It all clicked into place, how she avoided me, the secretive behavior, those late nights she claimed were just work. I decided I wouldn't let her off the hook easily. I couldn't, not after what I'd found. The next morning, I waited until she came home from work. She strutted in, all bitchy, acting like nothing was wrong. That's when I finally called her out. I laid the phone on the table and pushed it toward her, showing her the messages. Her face immediately turned pale, and she blinked like she was trying to deny what I was showing her. "Who is Mark?" I asked, voice trembling but firm. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. "It's none of your business, Dave. You're just jealous because I'm bored. I work hard. I deserve some fun." I couldn't believe her. That's what she said, deserve some fun. As if that somehow justified cheating on me. I felt like I was in some twisted nightmare. I told her I'd seen enough, that I wasn't stupid. She started lying, of course. Told me Mark was just some guy she knew from the gym, that they'd gone out for drinks, that it didn't mean anything, that I was just paranoid, but I knew better. I could see in her eyes she was full of shit. She was caught and she knew it. The anger inside me boiled over. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her feel as small and betrayed as I felt. But I held back. Instead, I just stared at her, waiting for her to admit the truth. She tried to deny everything, to spin some pathetic story about how she was stressed, how she was feeling trapped, how I was too focused on my recovery and not on her. She said she was sorry, but I didn't believe her. Sorry doesn't cut it when you're fucking someone else behind your husband's back, especially not when he's sitting there, wounded and vulnerable. That moment changed everything. I realized I was dealing with someone who wasn't just unfaithful. They were cold, manipulative, and selfish enough to lie straight to my face. I felt this mix of heartbreak and fury I'd never experienced before. It was like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into an abyss I couldn't escape from. All I could think about was how betrayed I was, how I'd trusted her, and how stupid I'd been to believe she genuinely cared. The pain was sharp, but somewhere inside I knew this was a turning point. I had to decide what I was going to do next. After she finished spinning her lies, I just sat there for a long time, trying to process what had happened. Part of me wanted to yell, to scream at her for the betrayal, but another part, more rational, knew I needed to keep my cool, at least for now. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose it, not yet. Instead, I told her I needed some space, that she should leave for a while. She looked surprised, maybe even annoyed, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of this mess. As she stomped out of the house, I felt this overwhelming sense of emptiness settle in. The house suddenly felt too quiet, too cold. I kept replaying those text messages in my head, trying to understand how someone I trusted could do this to me. I had been through so much already, losing my leg, struggling with rehab, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy, and now this. It was like I was being kicked when I was already down. I felt betrayed, embarrassed, and honestly, I was furious. Over the next few days, I started digging into everything I could find about Mark. I didn't want to just confront Lisa blindly. I wanted to understand what kind of person she was messing around with. Turns out, Mark wasn't just some casual fling. He was a specialist in prosthetics, someone I'd trusted to help me get better. I'd been working with him during my recovery, and now I realized he'd been the one she was secretly seeing behind my back. That made my blood boil even more. I came across some of her recent messages on her email, her social media, and even some screenshots she didn't bother deleting. The more I looked, the more I saw how detailed and calculated their affair had been. They'd been planning meetups, exchanging explicit messages, talking about sex, about how much they craved each other. It was clear she'd been lying to my face this entire time, hiding everything. I couldn't believe she'd gone so far, so cold, to cheat on me with a guy who was supposed to be helping me recover. It felt like a cruel joke. I didn't want to just confront her again. I needed to plan my next move carefully. I knew I had to get the truth out of her, but I also wanted her to see what she'd lost. If she thought she could screw around and get away with it, she was dead wrong. I decided I'd record her when she came back, catch her in another lie, and then lay everything out on the table. I wanted her to see the damage she'd caused, not just to me but to our marriage. When she finally returned a few days later, she had that bitchy attitude, acting like she owned the place. I was lying in bed, feeling like hell, but I played it cool. As soon as she walked in, I turned on the camera app on my phone and started recording. She started with her typical sass, trying to brush me off, saying I was overreacting, that this was all just a misunderstanding. I threw the proof right in her face, screenshots of her messages with Mark, showing exactly what they'd been doing. Her reaction, pure panic. She started denying everything, claiming it was just harmless flirting, That Mark was just a friend, that I was blowing things out of proportion. I could see the sweat on her forehead, her eyes darting around as if she was trying to come up with a way out of this mess. But I wasn't buying any of her bullshit anymore. I told her that I'd seen enough, that I knew exactly what she was up to, and that I was done accepting her lies. I told her she had one last chance to tell the truth, because from the look in her eyes I knew she was still hiding something. It was in that moment I realized just how much damage she'd done. Not just to me, though that was enough, but to our whole relationship. I felt this mix of heartbreak, anger, and disgust. How could she treat me this way? I had been so vulnerable, trying to rebuild my life after losing part of myself, only to find out that the woman I trusted was out there screwing someone else. That kind of betrayal cuts deep, and I knew I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. I was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant ending everything we had. The next few days were a blur of thinking, planning, and trying to make sense of what I'd uncovered. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smug expression when she was lying, the way her eyes darted around trying to avoid the truth. I thought about all the good times we had, the vows we made, and how she'd shattered all of that with a few secret texts and a few nights with Mark. It felt like I'd been hit by a freight train, and honestly, I was just trying to hold myself together. I knew I had to make a decision. Part of me wanted to grab her and scream at her, to yell at her for what she'd done. But another part, the smart part, realized that wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed a plan, something that would give me leverage, something that would make her realize she couldn't just lie her way out of this. I decided I'd set a trap. I'd lure her into confessing, get her to admit everything on her own. I didn't want to be the one forcing her to spill the beans. I wanted her to see that I knew she'd been lying all along. So I started to gather evidence, more than just screenshots. I set up a hidden voice recorder in the house, just in case she slipped up again. I also scheduled a little accidental visit to the prosthetic clinic where Mark worked. I wanted to see him face to face, to gauge just how deep this affair went. If I was going to end this, I needed to be sure she'd crossed every line, and I needed her to know I wasn't going to roll over and pretend everything was okay. When she came back home that evening, I was ready. I had everything set up and I played it cool. She strutted into the house, all bitchy, acting like she owned the place. I stayed quiet, watching her, letting her talk first. She started with her usual attitude, trying to act like nothing was wrong, but I kept my calm. I told her I knew everything. Her face faltered for a second, and I saw that flicker of panic. That was when I turned on the recorder and told her she might as well be honest, because I had enough to bury her already. I pressed play on the evidence, screenshots, all her messages, and then I revealed that I'd been recording her for the last few days. Her reaction was priceless. She froze, her eyes wide with shock, and then she started to lie again, saying it was all just harmless fun. That Mark was just someone she knew from the gym, that she didn't mean for it to go this far. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I'd caught her red-handed, that she wasn't fooling anyone. She kept trying to deny, but I made sure she knew I had the recordings, the messages, everything. I wanted her to understand that her lies were useless now. At that point, she started crying, fake tears, of course. She said she was sorry, that she loved me, that she didn't want to lose everything. But I looked at her and saw only a selfish woman who'd thrown everything away for some meaningless sex. I felt this huge mix of anger and sadness, knowing I'd given her every chance to be honest and faithful. Instead, she chose to betray me, lie to my face, and almost destroy everything we built. I told her this wasn't just about the infidelity. It was about respect, about trust. And she'd shattered that. I told her I needed time to think, to figure out what to do next. I told her I wasn't sure if I could forgive her, that she had to face the consequences of her actions. She looked defeated, but I knew that was just the surface. Deep down, I'm pretty sure she was already scheming her next move, trying to save herself as always. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this one. I had all the proof I needed, and I was done playing her game. In the days that followed, everything felt numb. I went through the motions, getting up, going to work, trying to keep things together. But inside, I was a mess. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again, especially someone I once loved so much. I kept replaying her lies, her fake tears, and the way she tried to spin everything to make herself look like the victim. But I also knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to decide how to move forward. I made a plan. I knew I couldn't just forgive and forget, at least not right away. She had hurt me too badly, so I told her she needed to leave. I couldn't have her in my house, pretending everything was fine while secretly screwing some guy behind my back. She argued, of course, calling me crazy, saying I was overreacting, trying to guilt me into keeping her around. That only made me more certain her lies were just too much. I wanted to be alone, to get my head straight, and to figure out whether this marriage was worth saving or if I should cut my losses. She left that very night, storming out with a suitcase full of her things and a mouthful of insults. I watched her go, feeling empty. Part of me wanted to chase after her, to beg her to stay and work things out, but I knew that wouldn't fix what was broken. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I also knew I needed to focus on myself, on healing physically, emotionally, and mentally. It was going to be a long road, but I was determined to get through it. Over the next few weeks, I started to rebuild my life without her. I threw myself into therapy, trying to deal with the emotional fallout. I also took time to work on my prosthetic, refine my mobility, and regain some sense of independence. It was during this period that I realized how much I'd let her manipulate me, how I'd ignored the signs, and how much I'd overlooked her selfishness. The worst part was the feeling of betrayal, the sense that I'd been so blind, so trusting, that I'd let her destroy what we'd built. I also reached out to Mark, the prosthetic specialist she'd been cheating with. I needed to hear from him to understand what kind of person he was. Turns out, he knew exactly what he was doing. He'd been feeding her lies, encouraging her to cheat, and probably enjoying the power he held over her. I wasn't surprised. Some men are just predators, looking for a weak spot and pouncing. I decided I'd confront him soon, not to fight or yell, but just to make sure I knew what kind of person I was dealing with. I needed to face every piece of this, no matter how ugly. In the end, I realized I had a choice. I could either stay broken, bitter, and consumed by anger, or I could learn from this. It wasn't easy. Every day was a struggle, and some nights I'd lie awake thinking about her, about what I could have done differently. But I also knew that I deserved better, someone who wouldn't betray me, someone who would stand by me even when I was at my worst. I'm still healing, still trying to find my footing, but I'm getting there. And honestly, I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned. Trust is fragile, and if you're not careful, people can tear it apart without a second thought. I don't want to be that guy who gives his heart away blindly again. Next time, I'll be more careful, because I've learned the hard way just how much some people don't deserve it. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole mess changed me. I used to think I was the one in control, the guy who could handle anything life threw at him, but losing my leg and then discovering my wife's betrayal knocked me flat. I honestly felt like I'd lost not just her, but a part of myself, my trust, my sense of security. It's a bitter pill knowing someone you loved and trusted could turn out to be so selfish, so manipulative. But through all that pain, I found something else. I learned that the only person responsible for my happiness and my healing is me, no one else. I can't change what Lisa did or how Mark played his part in this fucked up game, but I can control how I respond. I've come to accept that some people are just inherently selfish, and that sometimes you have to let them go, even if it hurts like hell. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about reclaiming my life piece by piece. I've started focusing on myself more, working on my physical recovery, yes, but also trying to rebuild my confidence and self-esteem. I've cut out the toxic relationships, reconnected with friends who truly care, and every day I remind myself that I don't need someone who betrays me to be whole. That realization has been both painful and freeing. I don't hold any grudges. I just understand that some people aren't worth the emotional toll. It's better to walk away, learn from it, and move on. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone in a similar situation, it's this. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep, but you're stronger than you think. Take the time to heal. Don't let anger or revenge consume you. That only prolongs the pain. Instead, focus on your recovery, your growth, and surround yourself with those who truly care. Sometimes, losing someone is the best thing that can happen because it clears the way for better, healthier relationships, ones built on honesty and respect. I'm not perfect, and I still have bad days, but I know now that I'm capable of moving forward. And maybe, just maybe, I'll come out of this stronger than I ever was before.